Cavaliers are looking to add some forward depth, reportedly deciding between DeMar DeRozan, Jonathan Kuminga, and Peyton Watson as all names that they're considering trying to find ways to try to land, but it's not going to be that simple. DeMar DeRozan may be the cleanest move for them to make, while Kuminga and Watson would both have sign and trade complications. How can they get this done? We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to go to Minnesota as after acquiring LaMelo Ball, they realize that they have a lack of big man depth, but reportedly the GM there says they aren't done adding to this team, and the market for Ben Mathurin gets real. We're talking about all that, plus a little bit more of the Kawhi Leonard investigation situation and more on today's The Full Court Podcast.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA City.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of The Full Court Podcast. My name is Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at The Full Court YT on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. And we're going to start off with the Cleveland Cavaliers. As I said, according to Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com, the Cleveland Cavaliers are weighing options between DeMar DeRozan, Jonathan Kuminga, and Peyton Watson, but there's complications in regards to all of that. Of course, DeMar DeRozan is the cleanest and simplest move for Cleveland, and he's an unrestricted free agent, and he already got paid $10 million for the season after being waived by the Sacramento Kings. And so because of that, he could be in play for for portion of the non-tax player mid-level exception because he already got $10 million. Adding Jonathan Kuminga or Peyton Watson would mean that they would have to do a sign and trade to get that done. Kuminga's reportedly looking for a contract in the range of $15 $20 million, and which is outside what the Cleveland Cavaliers can offer. And while still trying to re-sign James Harden as well, that would put them they would become a first apron hard cap team. So that means that the Cavs can't craft an offer sheet for Peyton Watson really either that the Denver Nuggets wouldn't match. So the interesting part about it is that the Cavs have Max Strus, Dennis Schroeder as salary matching components to try to match salaries for one of those restricted free agents. And it seems like right now, there may be some issues with that. The Hawks are already over the regular season roster limit, so that's not going to happen for them. And Denver seems to not be in a spot to really take back any type of bad salary either, as they're a second tax apron team as well. So the question then becomes about for the Cleveland Cavaliers, what do, right? DeMar DeRozan is the best move. I think just for the limitations there, to not get overly complicated, DeMar DeRozan is the best move. You can still then look to send off Max Strus or Dennis Schroeder in another deal if you need to, right? DeMar DeRozan, we all know what he is. At this point, he's a player that can create his own shot. He can get buckets. He can get to the free throw line, and he fits the mold of a player that can just go out there and get you a bucket. Now, he's a restricted type of player in the fact that he's not a real big defensive, plus there. He doesn't shoot the three ball at all. He plays a very particular way. You have to commit to playing DeMar DeRozan type basketball when he's on the court for you if you want the best out of DeMar DeRozan. And the question becomes about for any team that's interested in DeMar, is that where you are? Are you at the place to where you feel comfortable, making that move for DeMar DeRozan? Of course, Jonathan Kuminga and Peyton Watson have way more upside, right? Kuminga brings athleticism and youth, even though being a flawed player. Peyton Watson is a player that brings defense, length, and he's a more modern wing that can still shoot the three as well, grew as a three-point shooter last year. And both players are more long-term fits for the Cleveland Cavaliers than anything of what DeMar DeRozan can be, right? So if the Cavs want somebody who can grow with their roster and not just patch a hole, that's going to be Peyton Watson or it's going to be Jonathan Kuminga. But the problem is that they just can't get it done. James Harden contract is what complicates everything. They are boxed in to their own cap situation because of that. Now, it is what it is. You can explore sign and trade frameworks with Max Strus and Dennis Schroeder as you want to, but at the end of the day, it's going to be tough, right? Even with Harden's deal not yet being finalized, it does give them time to explore more paths. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs leave that deal unfinalized until the last moment as they, research everything that they can do. I wonder if there'll be a team that also could pivot towards Ben Mathurin. It's really weird that Cam Thomas has nobody interested in him at all, right? But the apron math is the problem here. And it's going to be the problem for a lot of teams. That second tax apron, well, they have first tax apron issues, is that re-signing James Harden triggers the hard cap. That's what it does, right? And so then because of the desired contracts of both Jonathan Kuminga and Peyton Watson, it means that sign and trades are very unlikely unless those teams want Max Strus, which, again, the Atlanta Hawks, they can't do that. It'd have to be a three-team trade, but they're already over the roster limit, so that can only get you so far. So the Cleveland Cavaliers may like players like Peyton Watson and Jonathan Kuminga, but they may have to settle for DeMar DeRozan. Now, I don't mean settle as in like he still can't help your team. He adds to the veteranship on the team. He's a player that's ready to win now. He may be motivated, especially with his former team, the Toronto Raptors, bringing back Kawhi Leonard. So maybe he wants to combat that. Like, I'm just saying that's a rah-rah thing. It may not be true. But these guys are going to have to figure it out. So the Cleveland Cavaliers are a team that right now is still trying to find what their future does look like. And we'll be covering it here as it goes on. But moving on, the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team that made one of the more unexpected moves this offseason in trading for LaMelo Ball. Not the fact that they made a trade, but the fact that it was for LaMelo Ball specifically, right? But according to Keith Smith of Spot Rack, he talked to a member of the Toronto Raptors front office, and the organization said that it views Ball as a missing piece to elevate this offense, but it did acknowledge that there's still another deal left to be made on the table, saying this. This was the kind of big move we needed to make to take the next step. LaMelo's going to really help our offense go to another level. We also had to take some of the playmaking load off Anthony Edwards. We need him to be fresher at the start of the playoffs. The best way to do that is to add more playmaking, and we got one of the best playmakers in the game. That's the downside of the trade, though. We had to give up some size. The good news is that Rudy Gobert is still getting it done at a very high level. Jaden McDaniels can play either forward spot. Anthony Edwards plays big, and LaMelo is a big guard too. But it's something that we'll continue to work through the offseason and in season 2. So we'll see. Right now, they did also talk about Trey Lyles, right? They did bring in Trey Lyles as a front court signing, and they do feel like he gives them a chance to start for them. Also, he returns to the NBA. You know, he had a really solid season in Real Madrid in 2025-26, where he averaged 13 points, 4.3 rebounds, 1.6 assists in 38 EuroLeague games. He also shot 50% from the field and 44% from three-point range. So there's some hope that Lyles is going to come in here and help them. But as we've seen before, sometimes betting on those players that went overseas after leaving the NBA, coming back and being able to help you, it doesn't always go that way. Look at Gershon Yabusele, for example, right? So the LaMelo trade was worth it, right? Getting a player like LaMelo, you're going to have to give up something that you still want. They gave up front court size and depth to get that done. It's just the reality of it. That's what they did, right? So now you have to ask in regards to this. They've created a front court hole, so how do they do that? You gave up some size, so now how do you fill that role? And I'll say this, one of the players, they may have one of the answers on their team already as well that they're going to have to develop, and that's what you have a hope in that regard. But again, I know for a team that's trying to compete now, wanting to bet on young players to really step up is a bit risky, but you have Rocco Zikarsky there, you have Juan Berenger there. These are two young players that you've gotten over the last couple of drafts that really do have some upside. They have tons of upside, of course. Like Juan Berenger, you pick with the 17th overall pick. Rocco Zikarsky, yes, was a pick in the second round, but many people had him going higher than that and feels like he was one of the steals in that second round. So now you're going to have to try to leverage that size with what you do also and hope that it's going to work out for you. Now, every team is going to have holes, right? You don't find teams that are perfect from top to bottom. Now, the question becomes about, can Trey Lyles become a real answer, or is he just a temporary patch? And I'll say this, he's a 30-year-old player that is coming back from EuroLeague. He brings veteran experience. You know, he could start and help stabilize there. And you don't really necessarily need to replace Julius Randle's production with your 4. You don't need to do that because you have now LaMelo Ball as another creator and those type of things. So you're not necessarily looking, at least in my opinion, for, you know, Trey Lyles to come in and give you everything that Julius Randle did, but he can give you some of that, right? And so because of that, you're hoping that that's going to help between that and Jaden McDaniels. Maybe Jaden McDaniels can take another step. You're hoping that some of these guys can show those things for you. And, you know, I'll say this, even if Trey Lyles ends up just being a temporary patch, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. If you can get a temporary patch, well, then gives you time to go out there and find your long-term answer, whether it be this season, next offseason, or whatever, and you got that for a EuroLeague player that you didn't even have to give a super big deal, yeah, there's no doubt that the Minnesota Timberwolves need more. But we've seen teams that are flawed make it pretty far because of the power of their star power. And the gravity of their star power is probably a better way to phrase that, so I'm not double downing on using the word power. But nonetheless, you know, and that's what they're hoping here. And the question becomes about how realistic is it that they can get that out of there? And I guess we'll see. I love the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is one of my favorite players that's a non-Chicago Bull. I think there's huge he still has a lot left for his game at only 24 years old. He's haven't even reached the final version of himself yet. And so because of that, like, keep refining, keep developing, and we'll see where this goes. And, you know, hopefully the Minnesota Timberwolves, you know, they continue to be that team that almost every time somebody counts them out, they seem to bounce back. And, you know, there's some hope that they're going to be able to be that again this season. Moving on to the next topic, Bennedict Mathurin is a player that, I get it that Ben Mathurin is flawed, and I want to be clear on that. But he's not a player that shouldn't have any type of value. For him to be a player that has scored as many as 17 points per game, you know, has always been double-digit points, even with being a bench player, has always found a way even as a bench player, to be very productive in this league. It's really kind of crazy that no team is willing to bite on him. Now, I think that's by nature some of them just the nature of restricted free agency. Teams don't want to put their money on a player that's likely to be matched, because why do that and then have your money freed up, or even worry about your money being tied up in that regard. And so we'll see what happens with Ben Mathurin with there. But they drafted Keaton Wagler, which also plays a part to them moving on from Ben Mathurin. But you look at this player, he's averaged 16 points per game for his NBA career. The only year that he's averaged under 16 points was the second year where he averaged 14 points, and he played 52 games. Last season, he played 54 and averaged 17.6. Ben Mathurin is a player that's still worth investing in. Oh, by the way, did I mention he's 24 years old? He's still a very young player. And so reportedly now, we've heard that now the Dallas Mavericks and the Milwaukee Bucks remain interested in him. Now, we've talked about the Bucks before. Any player that's young that has some upside makes sense for the Bucks right now with where they are in their rebuild. So you get a player that you can try to develop and things like that. The Mavericks are interesting, though, right? Because the Mavericks have a mix of veterans on their team, with Kyrie being there. But this is also a team that's clearly has decided to go younger, right? And they went a different route than was expected. A lot of people did expect them to draft a guard in this draft, and then they end up not doing that. They end up drafting a center, right? And so, that part of it is fine. I think that's perfectly fine. They got talent in that regard in Mo Johnson, who I think Morris Johnson is going to be a really good player, and you're adding him to still having P.J. Washington and Derek Lively on your team. But right now, the starting two guard for the Dallas Mavericks is Max Christie. Now, he's a 23-year-old player himself who's only been in the league a handful of years, also since 2022-23. So there's still a reason to believe that there's really good upside as he goes in to his sixth year now, I think, in the league. But getting a player like Ben Mathurin and trying to see if he can develop, it makes sense. You already acquired a former number 1 overall pick as well in your moves this offseason to see if anything's going to come, amongst all that. And now you just get to continue to add to that, see what you have, and see what you can develop here. That's it for the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks are in a place, as I've said with many teams, why not take a shot at all the upside that you can get and see how things are going to develop for you? That's where you are. So now you have Cooper Flagg there who, is looking like he's going to live up to the hype around him, which you really do love in that regard. You have Zachary Richer there who you're hoping that you're going to be able to reclaim and hope some things. Why not take another reclamation project and Ben Mathurin on, see what you get him? Now, I don't think at this point Ben Mathurin's getting a super long deal, maybe 2 years with a +1, and we'll see. But I think at this point, the Clippers are ready to move on. They're probably ready to hope for a team pushes for a sign and trade, try to get any assets back. But Ben Mathurin needs to find his next team, because I do think while he's a flawed player, and I'm not saying he's a star or anything like that, he's a player that has some upside that I think teams will be pretty well to invest in and see what you can get out of him. So let's see what happens there. The last topic before we get out of here, man, and I put this at the end because it's non-basketball related. The Kawhi Leonard investigation reportedly could extend out to 2027. Now, I personally do think that this is a wild thing for the NBA to allow to happen, because you're holding up a trade. Right now, what are the Clippers and the Raptors are going to do in regards to this if this trade does extend past the start of the regular season? What does that mean for the deals that they have, right? Of course, we know that potential fines could come down, draft pick forfeiture, contracts could be canceled. All those type of things are there in the realm of Adam Silver. When you find, salary cap circumvention, he has the right to do all those things. Due process does matter, though, right? And you do want them to get this decision right. But at the same time, I wonder, just for the basketball side of this, at what point do the Clippers and the Raptors wonder if this trade is still worth waiting on, right? Now, for the Raptors trying to become a championship contending team, I'm sure that, hey, take the risk and hope that it's going to go down, right? Because reportedly from Adam Silver, it's the teams that decided to hold up this trade. And maybe they decided at some point just to say, let's just go forward. We're willing to accept whatever it is because we can get a title out of this. And if this extends past the season, hell, by then, Kawhi Leonard's contract could be up. It could not even be a conversation at that point in time. And that's what I wonder, what would the penalties be if they wait to make this determination on what the penalties are going to be here, if there are even any, and Kawhi Leonard's contract is expired by then? What then do you do, right? And that's a part that I don't know. I don't know if the NBA even knows. So, there's tons of questions in regards to this, but I understand why you want to get it right. But at some point, it just feels like you just have to make some type of determination so teams, the league, and everything can move forward. But hey, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Let me know what you guys think on that part down below. Let me know, as a matter of fact, your thoughts on all the topics down below. What do you think about DeMar DeRozan? Can he still help a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers? Do you think he's still there? Do the Cavs pivot to a different team? What do you think happens with the Minnesota Timberwolves and them, realizing that they lost some big man depth in regards to this as well? Do you think that they can still be an actual factor in the Western Conference? Then what do you think about all this Kawhi Leonard nonsense? Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at the Full Court YT. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you can leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything basketball and NBA related. And I'll catch you guys the next time I feel like making an episode. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
Been a presentation of the Breaks Media.